A Nissan Qashqai, a Hyundai Tucson, and a Kia Sportage, all three of them the wrong side of 150,000 miles. Two of them passed 200,000, and only one of the three got there without a bill big enough to buy another car outright. Let me be straight with you before we go a step further, because I'd rather you trusted the rest of it. I haven't got three matched examples sitting on ramps side by side with the same driver and the same fuel. Nobody has. What I've got is the cars that made it, the cars that didn't, the invoices attached to both, and the paperwork the three manufacturers put in writing about what they expected their own product to survive. That last bit is where this gets interesting, and it's where most comparisons of these three never bother to look. Here's the thing that surprised me, and I've had more of these apart than I'd care to add up. The engines are not what decides this. Not one of these three is killed by its engine block at 200,000 miles. What kills them is the thing bolted to the back of the engine, the thing bolted to the front of the exhaust, and a single line in a service schedule that tells you a component needs nothing done to it for the entire life of the car. One of these three cars has a component like that, and it costs between £2,000 and £6,000 when the line turns out to be wrong. By the end of this, you'll know which of the three to buy at high mileage, which specific version of it, which engine and gearbox combination to walk away from without even starting it, and roughly what each of the three costs to keep alive per year past 150,000. And I'll show you the sentence in one of these manufacturers' own documentation that quietly contradicts what their own dealers tell owners on the phone. That one's worth waiting for. So, what does 200,000 miles actually test? Not durability in the way people mean it. Any of these three engines will do it. The Hyundai and Kia diesels are chain-driven common rail units that will run past 250,000 kilometers without opening up. And the Renault Nissan diesels in the Qashqai are the same engines that spent decades in vans. 200,000 miles tests the things around the engine, the emissions plumbing, the gearbox, the turbo's oil supply, the suspension bushes that nobody costs into ownership. And underneath all of it sits the running comparison I want you to hold on to for the next 20-odd minutes. What did the manufacturer expect this car to survive, and how do you know? You know because they wrote it down. Nissan's UK factory warranty on a Qashqai is 3 years or 60,000 miles, whichever comes first. Nissan's manufacturer warranty lasts for 3 years or 60,000 miles. And once the car passes that mileage, the warranty no longer applies, even if it's less than 3 years old. Hyundai gives you 5 years with no mileage cap at all. Kia covers a new car for unlimited mileage up to 36 months, and then for 100,000 miles between months 37 and 84. Three very different bets on the same class of car. 200,000 miles is where you find out who was bluffing. Start with the Qashqai, because it's the one most of you are actually looking at. It invented this segment in this country, and it outsold everything for years, which means there are more of them at high mileage than the other two combined. The petrol first, and I'm not going to soften this, the 1.2 Dig T, the little Turbo 3 that went into 2018 cars, has a timing chain that stretches. It isn't a rumour, and it isn't a handful of unlucky owners. The chain is prone to premature stretch. A chain kit at an independent specialist typically runs to $900 to $1,400. And if it's already touched the valves, the bill goes past $2,500, with a reconditioned engine starting at $3,000. And Nissan never issued a recall for it. I've read owners' accounts of dealers quoting 750 quid just to strip it far enough to find out. One owner was told by a Nissan case manager that the chain needed changing every 50,000 miles, which is fascinating because there is no such interval anywhere in the service schedule. That's the bit I can't explain to you honestly. I don't know why there's no recall and no published interval on a component with that failure rate, and I'm not going to invent a reason. I know what it costs, and I know how to test for it, which is this. Start one from stone cold. First thing on a January morning, bonnet up and listen for 30 seconds. A metallic rattle that fades as the oil pressure comes up is the sound of your $2,500. Walk away. Doesn't matter how clean the boot is. The diesels are better, genuinely. The 1.5 and the 1.6 DCI will do the miles. What they will not do is survive short journeys. And this is where I need to be precise, because DPF problems gets thrown around as though it's a mystery. It isn't. Turbo trouble on these is usually oil starvation, caused by the turbo's oil feed and return pipes partially blocking with carbon when the engine gets switched off while the turbo is still very hot. And letting it idle for a couple of minutes after a motorway run genuinely reduces the risk. That's it. That's the whole mechanism. A carbonized oil feed pipe you could hold in 2 fingers, and the turbo behind it is 700 pounds fitted. And a blocked filter downstream will take the turbo bearings out from the other direction as the back pressure builds. School runs and a 5-mile commute for 8 years is how you get there. Now the gearbox, and this is the one that decides the Qashqai's whole case. The Xtronic CVT, the Jatco unit. When these fail, and a meaningful number of them do, you are not looking at a repair, you're looking at a replacement. Owners on the UK forums have been quoted around 5,000 at a Nissan dealer, and one had a quote of 6,000 in parts plus 800 labour, with Nissan offering to cover 3/4 of the parts as goodwill because the servicing wasn't spotless. Independent rebuild and recondition quotes for the same job land around $2,300 to $3,300 on a car worth $5,000. And these aren't all failing at $200,000. There's a documented case of a 2013 car at 60,000 miles with a $5,400 repair bill and Nissan declining to help. The failure pattern is consistent. Judder at low speed, revs climbing without the car going anywhere, and internal bearing debris that means the whole unit comes out. Owners report jerking, fluid leaks, and outright failure, with loss of power and grinding noises pointing at internal bearings, and usually requiring a complete gearbox replacement. To be fair to the car, and I do want to be fair to it, the later Qashqais have genuinely improved. In the most recent What Car? Reliability survey, only 7% of second-generation Qashqai's owners reported any fault at all of them engine-related, all sorted in a day or less, with Nissan covering the costs. That's a good number. It's also a number about cars up to 5 years old, which is not the conversation we're having. Hold both facts. The Hyundai Tucson next, and here's where it gets simpler, because the Tucson and the Sportage are the same car underneath with different jewellery. Same engines, same gearboxes, same suppliers, largely the same failure list. The 1.7 CRDi, the U2 D4FD, 115 or 141 horsepower, is a chain-driven twin-cam with common rail injection and a variable geometry turbo, and it went into the Tucson and the EX35 from 2010 and the Sportage over the same period. It's a good engine. It's fundamentally solid and capable of well past 250,000 kilometres with proper maintenance. But like most modern diesels, it depends on regular motorway running to keep the filter, the recirculation valve and the turbo healthy. The failures cluster in exactly the same 3 places as the Nissans. Turbos going as the miles climb, usually the oil seals in the unit letting go. And the giveaway is blue or grey smoke with a smell you won't mistake for anything else. Reckon on 700 to 1200 fitted for a turbo, a few hundred for a sensor that puts it in limp mode, and a genuinely annoying labour bill on the recirculation valve because of where they mounted it. On the 1.7, the valve sits behind the battery, the air intake and the intercooler pipework, which pushes the job to 4 or 5 hours before anyone touches the part. Then there's the gearbox question again, and Hyundai's version of the mistake is different from Nissan's. The 7-speed dual clutch is a dry clutch design, and dry clutches and British town traffic get along like a house on fire. The 141 horsepower cars use a 7-speed dual clutch with a dry clutch that struggles in stop-start traffic, with judder in first and a genuinely unnerving delay when you get back on the throttle after coasting because it's sitting in second instead of dropping to first. That last one isn't a comfort complaint. That's you pulling out of a junction. Kia and Hyundai released software updates for the lag, but the hardware limitation underneath doesn't go away. And here's the short one, because it deserves about 20 seconds. At 200,000 miles, none of these three fails its MOT on the engine. It fails on suspension bushes, drop links, corroded brake pipes and rear arches. On the Tucson, budget 100 to 150 for drop links, and 250 to 450 for arms and bushes, and the same money on the other two. It's the least interesting part of high mileage ownership, and it's the part that actually takes cars off the road, because the bill is 400 quid on a car worth 2,000. If any of that has been useful, subscribing takes a second, and it's how these keep finding people who own one of these three. Two things still to come. The Sportage's warranty has a cliff edge in it that almost nobody notices until they're standing on the wrong side of it. And there's a sentence in Nissan's own documentation that I think is the most quietly expensive line of text in this entire comparison. The Kia Sportage, then. Mechanically, everything I just said about the Tucson applies, and I'm not going to repeat myself for the sake of balance. Same 1.7, same dual clutch, same emissions plumbing. What's different is what happens on the manual cars, and what happens to the warranty. The manuals have a clutch that goes early. Clutch wear shows up on the 1.6 from around 60 to 90,000 kilometres, with sluggish shifting and slipping under load. On 2010 to 2015, manuals the clutch and dual mass flywheel often go before you'd expect. Difficulty engaging, slip under acceleration, vibration through the pedal, typically between 40 and 70,000 miles. That's an 800 to 1,200 pound job, and you'll do it twice by 200,000. Worth knowing, not a deal breaker, because a clutch is a wear item and a CVT isn't. The number that made me sit up, though, is this one. Diesel Sportage owners reported that 56% of their cars went wrong, against only 20% of the petrols. Half the faulty cars were in the garage more than a week. 5% of bills topped $1,500, and 90% were fixed for nothing. 56 against 20 on the same body, same suspension, same interior. There's a related figure that puts diesel Sportage reliability at 66% against 93% for the petrol. Now, I want to mark this properly. That's owner survey data. Sample sizes in those class breakdowns are not enormous, and it lumps a NOx sensor in with an engine rebuild. My read, and it is a read, not a fact, is that almost the entire gap is emissions hardware and the dual clutch, not the bottom end of the engine. But I'm inferring that from the fault categories, not from anything Kia published. And now the warranty, which is genuinely the best thing about buying one of these used, with a catch in it. The warranty transfers to each new owner as long as it hasn't expired. And Kia covers the car for unlimited mileage up to 36 months, then for 100,000 miles between months 37 and 84. Read that again as a high mileage buyer. The unlimited part lasts 3 years. After that, there's a hard ceiling at 100,000 miles. So the cover evaporates at precisely the mileage, where the filter, the valve, the turbo and the clutch pack start presenting their bills. It's still miles better than Nissan's 60,000. It is not the 7 years of protection the badge implies for a car like the one we're talking about. And it only transfers at all if the car has been serviced and maintained to schedule, which means at 200,000 miles, the stamps in the book are worth real money. So who wins? Against the Qashqai, it isn't close. And the reason is the gearbox. A Tucson or a Sportage with the 6-speed manual and a diesel that spent its life on motorways is the car that reaches 200,000 miles for maintenance money. A Qashqai with a CVT reaches it or it doesn't, and if it doesn't, the repair costs more than the car. Between the two Koreans, anybody telling you there's a clear gap is guessing. One of the bigger US datasets separates them by a single point. 84 out of 100 for the Sportage, 83 for the Tucson. And that's American ownership data on newer cars. So treat it as a tiebreaker and nothing more. I'd take the Sportage, and only because of the warranty transferring and it usually costing less to buy. If you found a better kept Tucson tomorrow, buy the Tucson. The paperwork matters more than the badge. Now, that sentence I promised you. Somebody has decided how much of this car's maintenance you're going to be told about, and the deciding factor was not your gearbox lasting. Nissan's UK warranty ends at 3 years or 60,000 miles, and the CVT fluid in that gearbox, the fluid whose degradation is the single most common cause of the failure that costs you between £2,000 and £6,000, is presented to you as needing nothing. The official schedule tends to list the CVT fluid as sealed for life. Lifetime fill doesn't mean the fluid lasts forever. It means Nissan doesn't schedule a change, and in practice it degrades. Here's where it stops being marketing and becomes arithmetic. Owners quoting the service manual find it says to inspect the fluid, to have deterioration checked at 100,000 kilometres, 60,000 miles, under harder use, and then this. If the inspection is not performed, change the fluid at 60,000 miles. I have not been able to put my hands on a UK market printing of that page to confirm the exact wording, so take it as owner reported rather than verified, and I'd rather tell you that than pretend. But look at what it's saying. There is an interval. It's 60,000 miles. It just isn't in the bit anybody reads. So the fluid needs changing at exactly the mileage the warranty expires, and you were told it never needs changing at all. One owner went to his nearest dealer and was told they'd had no guidance from the manufacturer about an interval, so it was up to him whether he ever did it. The two numbers side by side. A fluid change at a UK gearbox specialist quotes from $126 to $300 plus VAT. The failure it prevents, $2,300 at an independent, $5,000 plus at a dealer. And if you think they didn't know which way that arithmetic ran, consider what happened in the markets where owners sued. Nissan extended CVT warranty coverage in North America. The assembly, internal components, valve body, torque converter, cooler kit from 60 months and 60,000 miles out to 84 months and 84,000. A later settlement went further, reimbursing owners who'd paid out of pocket after the original warranty expired up to $5,000 per repair at a non-Nissan garage. Different country, different law, and I'm not pretending a US settlement gives you rights on a Wednesday in Wolverhampton. That's not the point. The point is that reimbursing owners is what a company does when it has finished arguing about whether the failure is real. Nobody lied to you. That's what makes it work. A schedule that says inspect rather than replace is technically true, costs the manufacturer nothing, keeps the quoted servicing price lower than the competition's on the brochure, and lands the entire consequence on whoever owns the car in year 6, which is you. It's a sentence somebody wrote in a document, and it's worth $2,000 to $6,000, and now you know it's there. There's a wider thing in this that I keep coming back to, and it isn't about villains. When you buy a 200,000-mile car, you're not really buying the car. The metal is the least of it. You're buying somebody's habits, whether they let it idle for a minute after the motorway, whether they took it for a proper run once a fortnight instead of 4 miles to the shop, whether they paid £150 for a fluid change nobody told them to do. Two identical Sportages off the same line in the same week can be £4,000 apart in condition by year 12, and not one bit of that difference is Kia's doing. Which means judgment is the actual skill here, not brand loyalty, not survey scores, not what your brother-in-law swears by. The ability to stand in front of a specific car with a specific history and read it. That skill takes 10 minutes to learn per model, and it's worth thousands. And it is very quietly the thing that separates people who run cheap cars happily for decades from people who conclude that all modern cars are rubbish. Some are. Most were just badly kept by somebody who was never told what mattered. So here's the procedure, not a rule of thumb, something you can actually run on the car in front of you. 1. Find out exactly what gearbox it has from the V5 and the badge before anything else. CVT Qashqai. Assume a £2,000 liability unless there are fluid change receipts. Dry dual-clutch Tucson or Sportage. Drive it in traffic, not on an empty road, and feel for judder pulling away and hesitation getting back on the throttle. Manual, it's a clutch, it's a known number, relax. 2. Cold, start it yourself. Not warmed up by the seller. 30 seconds bonnet up. Rattle on a 1.2 petrol Qashqai, walk. Diesel rattle that settles is usually normal. Whining that rises with revs is the turbo. 3. Get the fluid on your fingers. The Qashqai's CVT has a dipstick, and fresh fluid is light and translucent. Dark brown or burnt smelling tells you what the last owner did and didn't do. 4. Run the registration through the DVSA recall checker before you hand over money, on any of the 3. Hyundai and Kia have had a long run of fire risk campaigns over the years, and outstanding work is free work. 5. The arithmetic that decides it. Take the single most likely big-ticket failure for that exact engine and gearbox. Get a real local quote for it, not a guess. If that figure is more than about 40% of what you're paying for the car, and there's no receipt showing it's already been done, walk, no matter how good the rest of it looks. If it's under 40% or there's a receipt with a date and a mileage on it, buy it and stop worrying. Run that and the bill never arrives. Not because you got lucky, but because you priced the failure before you bought the car. And the one you bought is the one where the failure had already happened to somebody else. Now I want to hear from the people with the real data on this. And that's you, not me. If you've got one of these 3 past 150,000 miles, tell me the mileage, the engine, the gearbox, and the single biggest bill you've had. Diesel or petrol, manual or auto, and whether it's mostly motorway or mostly town. That combination is the whole story, and it's the thing no survey captures. And if you're a technician who has these on the ramps every week, and I've got something wrong, say so plainly. I'd rather be corrected in public than repeated in 6 months. I read the replies. Genuinely, they're where about half of what I know about the newer stuff has come from. There's one thread I deliberately left alone today. The 1.3-litre engine that replaced the 1.2 in the Qashqai was co-developed with Mercedes, and it also uses a chain. And I'm starting to see the same cold start rattle reports on cars used for short runs. I don't have enough of them apart yet to tell you whether that's a pattern or a coincidence, and I'm not going to pretend otherwise until I do. If that's the kind of thing you want to know before the internet catches up, the subscribe button is the whole mechanism. Check the fluid, listen to it cold, and buy the previous owner's habits rather than the badge.